This week, we are bringing you part 3 of our series based on the rise and fall of world-renowned fasting expert Linda Burfield Hazard. Get ready for an inordinate amount of starvations, a ridiculous trial, an anarchist compound on the peninsula in Home, Washington, and the meteoric rise in popularity Linda Hazard enjoyed later in life. Fires, mayhem, and Linda Hazard's final fast. Again, for this episode, I read the excellent book Starvation Heights by Greg Olson. I've been meaning to read this for a very long time, and it did not disappoint. Totally recommend.
Cool. This is it. This is the end of our trilogy.
Yeah.
This is part 3.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do anything for a couple weeks because we're going on vacation.
It's our summer break coming up, so enjoy this. We got some exclusive episodes coming your way before the end of the month, so stay tuned on that. You know, yeah, Muriel's got to do that. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, both new and old. Speaking of Patreon, special thanks to Gabrielle and Antonia. If this podcast floats your boat, check out murielsmurders.com/support to learn how you can be a part of the family.
Wow.
We can't make this show without our community's support, and we truly appreciate the love, and we're essentially begging you to sign up. Okay.
Yeah. All right. This is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if you're anyone kind of like Nick and you don't want to hear about those kind of things, go listen to a different podcast.
Plus, we joke and we curse, but you know that because this is part 3. So quick reminder, if you skip the first 2 parts, go back and listen to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just going to be more of that stuff headed your way right now.
Yeah. All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
Okay, let's get started. Ooh, scrolling to the top of my page.
Yeah, you got a little extra funky with that. Let's get started, too.
I know. And also, wait, we're not starting with me. We're starting with you because we're doing a world famous Nick Casalini style recap.
Yeah, this one's not good. Okay. Part 2 of our Dr. Linda Hazard trilogy ended with a Mission Impossible type escape from Starvation Heights. Mary, a.k.a. I think her name was Mary.
No, Margaret.
Margaret, a.k.a. Cinnamon Roll Superwoman, is trying to smuggle the horrifically malnourished Dora away from her shack in the scary woods. It's the early 1900s. They're trapped in the Pacific Northwest rainforest boonies, and Dr. Linda Hazard and her husband are serial killers and pilferers. Dora's sister has indeed died, but it really seems like the body they keep presenting is not actually hers, like it's someone else's body. So I'm still thinking you lied, and maybe the sister will pop up alive, but whatever.
Quit banging on the table.
No. Okay. The uncle is helping out at this point, along with nurses who are hip to what the Hazards are up to, but it's still pretty much up to the heroine we all wish we had in our corner, Captain Cinnamon Roll. I'm really not sure what else I'm supposed to remember.
Okay, so they escaped from Dr. Hazard's sanitarium, and they took a boat over to Tacoma, and that's what we're going to pick up. At the end of July 1911, Dora Williamson walked into the lobby of the Grand Tacoma Hotel. Tacoma and Seattle were in a fierce battle to determine which city would become the most popular in Puget Sound at the time. So Tacoma threw down and built the most fabulous luxury hotel north of San Francisco, a 185-room Victorian-style masterpiece high up on a bluff overlooking the sailboats in Commencement Bay.
What? Is it still there?
We'll get there.
Okay.
For a while, it was unironically nicknamed the Titanic of the City of Destiny. Over the years, the Tacoma Hotel hosted the fanciest of fancy guests, former President Theodore Roosevelt, Rudyard Kipling, Mark Twain, Babe Ruth, just to name a few. In the beginning, the hotel even boasted an 800-pound bear named Jack, who had been raised by the hotel from a cub and roamed around the extravagant lobbies, drinking cocktails and beer and stealing plates of food to the great delight of patrons. Unfortunately, like the Titanic, the Tacoma Hotel was an anomaly not long for this world. First, 2 years after its grand opening, Jack the Bear was shot to death by a confused police officer in downtown Tacoma.
Understandable, I guess.
Then, in 1935, the hotel spectacularly burned to the ground and was converted into a parking lot. It was just too fabulous and expensive to rebuild.
Damn, and Tacoma really hasn't bounced back. No offense, Tacoma. I actually love Tacoma. Tacoma's actually secretly cool now, but boy, did it lose in that battle against Seattle, which is like the more popular one.
Yeah. But back in July 1911, the Titanic had not yet sunk, and the hotel, minus Jack the Bear, was still fantastic. Porcelain French bathtubs in the room, chandeliers, verandas, crystal glasses, ballrooms. In the hotel lobby, huge ornately carved pillars shot up to the ceiling. A grand staircase dominated the room, which was decorated in teal and gold and lined with flowery frescoes. It was the kind of splendid hotel Dora and Claire would have loved in the pre-Linda Hazard days.
Yeah, it's like Grand Budapest Hotel, Washington style.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I actually love those places, man. They're so cool.
But this time, instead of sipping tea with her sisters in expensive gowns, Dora just stood there in a dress that hung off her body while people in the lobby gawked at her. Claire was gone, and Dora was unrecognizable, skeletal, weighing around 60 pounds, flanked by her lady's maid, Margaret Conway, and her concerned uncle, John Herbert. Their first order of business was to meet with Lucian Agassiz, the British Vice Consul. Now, according to our AI overlords, a British Vice Consul, if you're curious, worked regionally for the British consulate, dealing with people with British citizens like Dora Williamson. Now, Lucian was, of course, working in Washington State at the time. When I talk about him, just picture a portly, 36-year-old, indignant British man with a heart of gold and an enormous mustache who played a huge role in the investigation into Claire's death.
Okay.
So that day, Lucian was there in the lobby of the Tacoma Hotel to hear an outrageous story about two wealthy British citizens who had allegedly been kidnapped, held captive, and starved by a New Age doctor in the dark woods of Olalla, Washington. Lucian listened to Dora and Margaret Conway, furiously writing everything down in his notebook. He heard about Dr. Linda Hazard, how she'd possibly intentionally starved Claire Williamson to death in her half-built sanitarium in her compound in the woods. How Dora Williamson had been held captive in a shack on the property with no way to contact the outside world, and how now, it seemed for all intents and purposes, Linda and her husband Samuel Hazard had commandeered the Williams sisters' vast fortune. Now, Dr. Hazard was the executive of Claire Williamson's estate. Dr. Hazard had legal guardianship over Dora, and her husband, Samuel Hazard, had power of attorney over Dora. And to add insult to injury, under Linda Hazard's care, Dora and Claire had lost all of their priceless family jewels. By the end of their hour-long meeting, Lucian, I keep saying his name crazy, Lucian Agassiz was absolutely...
That's already a pretty crazy name. Lucian Agassiz with the big mustache.
It's like Agassi, Andre Agassi, the tennis player, but with a Z at the end. Too much for me. Lucian Agassiz was absolutely, thoroughly shocked. He went straight away to find a lawyer, and his first order of business was to void Dr. Linda Hazard's guardianship over Dora. As for Dora, pretty much all of her money was frozen, tied up in legal stuff. And for the first time in her life, Dora couldn't afford a room at the fanciest hotel in town. She and Margaret couldn't afford any room at all. Vice Consul Lucian offered Dora his summer home, but Dora was horrified at the idea of keeping Lucian's children from enjoying the lake house for the summer. It's like deep-rooted, like a breeding, and politeness.
Yeah, fancy person, whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely not. So instead, she insisted they pitch a tent on the lawn. Now, Dora and Margaret set up shop.
She just went from like the most fancy to like, actually, I'll just sleep outside. Well, I guess she's been already roughing it in this weird shack forever.
Has been.
Why doesn't the uncle get him a hotel room?
Listen, if you can keep banging on the table and moving it around, and it's fine. But this is not going to be a very good video. Fine, I won't say anything else.
Okay. Wait, why doesn't the uncle pitch in? Where's the uncle?
The uncle went back. I mean, I think they're the richest people in the family.
Yeah.
And it's like a money pit. And who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't have any money.
Okay.
So they set up in this like voluminous white canvas tent near the main house. It was definitely more like glamping than camping. Like it was a rich, like fancy wedding tent, it had furniture in it and stuff like that. But, to her credit, Dora was out there sleeping rough in Tacoma, determined to get justice for her sister. In the tent, Dora could finally breathe and come to terms with her injuries. She was obviously extremely frail. She needed fairly constant nursing from Margaret Conway, but she was also finally getting hit with the panic attacks, night terrors, and grief as she processed through what had happened over the past few months.
Yeah.
And one of the more frequent night terrors Dora had was about a small detail she hadn't considered before. How on earth did Claire manage to send Margaret Conway a cablegram? So if you remember, when Dora and Claire initially started working with Dr. Hazard in early February 1911, they were kept in a small unit in the Buena Vista apartments in Seattle. The girls were subjected to Dr. Hazard's patented fasting cure from February 2nd to April 21st. Now, on April 22nd, Linda Hazard had the girls transferred via ambulance from the Buena Vista apartments in Seattle to her attic bedroom in Olalla. And at that point, Claire had lost most of the weight out of the two sisters and was probably already close to dying. But she was still fairly sharp mentally. And then on the other hand, at this point, Dora had temporarily lost it. She was delirious, rambling, unable to communicate. That same day, April 22nd, Claire signed the codicil to her will, possibly in anticipation of her death, voluntarily giving Dr. Hazard all kinds of privileges over her money and remains. So they go to Olalla after that, right?
Okay.
And at some point, while Claire was in that little attic bedroom in the Hazard home, separated from Dora, remember they were kept apart, dying, mostly bedridden, and constantly being watched by Dr. Hazard and her employees, she somehow got a cablegram sent from the general store in town in Olalla, a cablegram to Margaret Conway on the other side of the world requesting her presence at the sanitarium. Something that we could pretty much infer Dr. Hazard would be absolutely furious about. Right?
Sure. Okay.
And for the life of her, Dora couldn't imagine how Claire did it. None of the people working for Dr. Hazard would have sent this cablegram for her. Did Claire use the last of her cash to bribe someone? Did she sneak out at night and drag herself through the woods for help while Dora was in bed, delirious? And here's my thing. It sounds like, according to Dora, up until Claire's death, she was still committed to Dr. Hazard. She was still following all the instructions, keeping her fasting routine. She never mentioned anything to Dora about deviating from the plan or leaving the sanitarium or reaching out to friends and family for help. Nothing, right? The cablegram to Margaret was haunting in a way. It was the only real indication that Claire thought the girls were in trouble. The only thing that seemed like it wasn't in compliance with Dr. Hazard. Just one sentence. Come SS Marama, May 8th, first class, Claire. And then on May 19th, Claire was dead. So back at the sanitarium at Olalla, Linda Hazard was raging.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Let's just chill for 1 second.
What?
So how did she... just the question of like, how did she do it?
Yeah.
That's the main thing that Dora is like going over and over again. That's the main thing keeping her up at night.
Mostly. And I think a part of it, to me, I think a part of it, it's also, it's the only indication that she had that Claire was not going willingly into this death.
Yeah.
That in her final days, she reached out to someone for help, you know, because there's kind of two stories. One is that Claire was fanatically, you know, like committed to doing this thing and like was like disciple of Linda Hazard, right? And marched to her death in this, you know, with this woman who's just evil, right?
Right.
And then this is the kind of thing where like she's like, oh, maybe while I was delirious, while I was passed out, Claire was actually trying to get us out of here, you know?
Man, I mean, and it ended up saving Dora's life.
Yeah.
There's also that part.
Yeah, it totally did. But there's no other indication. Like she's willingly signing away all of her rights. She's willingly, you know, she's willingly following the treatment, you know? So it's hard. It's a little harder, I think, to think about. Were her final days voluntarily following these instructions, or were her final days like trying to figure out some way to get them help?
Terrified for her life.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Linda Hazard's pissed.
She's super mad. So she blames pretty much everything on the meddling cinnamon bun lady, Margaret Conway, you know, and her thing was, you know, Linda had done nothing wrong. You know, the money, the family jewels, they were gifts from Claire. And it was Claire who encouraged the guardianship over her sister because clearly Dora was insane. You know, it was all completely outrageous. Her fasting cure was miraculous. And her whole thing was the fact that Dora was alive and recovering was proof that her fasting cure worked. But
I mean, the only reason she's alive is because Margaret was, you know, like smuggling beans into her mouth or something.
But, you know, Linda didn't wallow. She consolidated her power and got ready to fight. Her husband, devoted followers, and paid employees had her back. She assembled a legal team to fight up any upcoming criminal charges. She was going to come out clawing and biting. But unfortunately for Linda Hazard, she was walking into a crap storm of her own making. Dora's guardianship hearing was the first major loss. I think Linda thought she could tell the court she accidentally left all her documents and like proof of claims at Olalla, and then that would just make everything go away. At any rate, she came to court day after day, defiantly unprepared. And then when she finally produced the guardianship documents, they were riddled with errors. Linda Hazard's plan went over like a rotten pine tree in an Olalla gulch. Her guardianship over Dora was voided, and she was ordered to pay Dora close to $1,000 in stolen funds. At the end of the trial, the presiding judge said, "There is something which seems to me unholy about the relations of this woman and her patients. All the money this girl and her sister had was practically in the hands of Dr. Hazard, and this does not look right to a court of equity." And with that, Dora's legal team saw an opening for criminal charges against Dr. Hazard. And Dora got stronger and madder about her sister's death.
Yeah, good.
Here's the thing, though. Kitsap County was tiny and super broke at the time, to the point that Dora Williamson had to offer to fund the trial herself if need be. A murder trial starring a rich woman like Linda Hazard would be way too expensive for the county to bear. So I don't know why it matters if she's rich. Actually, who knows? That's what they said, like a wealthy. I think maybe she's very connected, or that, you know, she has a lot of money to spend on her defense or something.
Well, this is a time and place where if you're a doctor, then it's like, oh yeah, please, no, go starve all those people to death. It's like any status is just like,
it's a lot. You know, it's hard to get it's hard to get the upper people down, right?
Yeah.
Take them down.
We're so smart.
So they were kind of dragging their feet in charging Linda Hazard for murder. But that changed in what I feel is a hilarious turn of events.
Okay.
I guess even bad publicity is good publicity, because in the middle of all this drama, Dr. Hazard got some super high-profile invites to go starve some people. On August 4th, the local papers announced that Dr. Hazard was flying to New York and Hong Kong to go starve some members of the British royal family. I can't even wrap my head around that. So this was a good news, bad news situation for Linda, right? Good news, somehow she was more popular than ever, right? Bad news, Dora's legal team could now demonstrate Linda was a flight risk, and that was enough to push Kitsap County into an arrest. On August 5th, the chick was busted. She was charged and arrested for intentionally starving Claire Williamson to death. Kitsap County didn't have a jail. They were too broke. So Linda was held at a deputy's house in Port Orchard.
I wonder if Tacoma is in King County.
I think it is. At least it was back then. I think it was.
It was in King County.
Because they were talking about those were the two, like, law, police, something.
Okay. All right. Whatever. It's just funny to me where like, it's still back then. Like now we can like build new stadiums for sports teams, but not like fix the asbestos in the roof at the local school or whatever.
Right.
Like we just have no money for like things like courts, but they're like, yeah, that hotel, yeah, make it nicer than London.
No, Kitsap, it was a different county for sure.
Yeah, that's where my grandparents lived.
Oh, I know. That's like why this story was so fun to do.
Yeah.
So she ranted all the way to Port Orchard. This was a conspiracy. She had too many uneducated haters. She was being persecuted by shady figures on the Washington State Medical Board who wanted to revoke her license out of ignorance and prejudice. Linda was righteously indignant. She railed about how she had been successfully starving this blind boy in Seattle for 3 weeks, and he was almost cured. He was almost not blind anymore, right? And her arrest was putting his recovery in jeopardy. His blindness was now on Kitsap County's hands.
I mean, what's so funny about it is just like, if you pay her to do that, I mean, I guess she does the whole like beating massage thing.
Yeah.
But then it's just like, you're basically just paying like a bully to scream at you to not eat. Right? Like people can just not eat, but if you left that up to yourself, you would just eat. So you're really just paying for like a prison guard.
Yeah, it's like a personal trainer or something. But evil. After weeks of scrambling, Linda pulled together her bail, a whopping $30,000 worth over $1 million in today's money. After her release, she went straight to the press. She was pleading not guilty to the murder charges. They were preposterous. I mean, like again, Dora's recovery was from the fasting treatment was proof the fasting treatment worked, obviously, right? The investigation into Linda Hazard forged on despite her objections. And surprise, surprise, the investigation recovered more patients Linda Hazard had starved to death. In 1910, Frank Kelly died after being starved for 37 days. A man named Louis Rader died just a week before Claire, starved to death in a room in Seattle. Edward Ehrman, Frank Southward, Maud Ritney, Blanche Tyndall, Viola Heaton, Daisy Haglund, Ida Wilcox, just to name a few. And there were more, too, deaths going back to 1902. For Linda, though, this path of logic was ridiculous. She'd only killed 12 patients out of like 1,000. You know, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet. But with those dozen...
You just can't then eat the omelet. You have to then throw the omelet into the garbage.
Right, because you're fasting.
Yeah.
But with those dozen dead patients, a pattern was emerging to investigators. as with Claire Williamson, Linda often did her patients' autopsies herself, listing their cause of death as basically anything other than starvation. She was also often the recipient of fabulous gifts like family jewels, and her paperwork was riddled with, papers and documents that looked suspiciously like forgeries. For instance, the investigation into Claire's death uncovered some evidence pointing to Linda's shady methods of acquiring jewels. So Claire had a diary that she kept consistently. And at one point after Claire's death, Linda gave the diary to Margaret Conway and demanded that Margaret read Claire's final entry. Now, at the time, Margaret wasn't ready to read it, but she did keep the diary with her. And at the end of their stay there, as she and Dora were leaving the sanitarium for good, Linda panicked and demanded Margaret return the diary. All of a sudden, she said, I have to have it back. But Margaret was keeping that shit. No, she was not giving that back. Not only was it a keepsake she planned to give to Dora, Margaret had a great radar for red flags. If Linda wanted the diary back, it was probably for something nefarious. She was not going to give it to her. So when they finally cracked the diary open, they found two things. So the first was Claire's supposed final entry on May 19th, the day of her death. Her final wishes, which were Linda Hazard could have whatever she wanted with her, do whatever she wanted with her remains. Linda Hazard could keep all her stuff, the gowns and linens and her traveling trunks. She wanted a precious family jewel gifted to each nurse who cared for her. So not Dora, but the nurses. And sorry, I lost my place really quick. And she wanted Linda Hazard to have all of her diamonds. So the handwriting looked like Claire's, but it was a little wonky in places. She misspelled Margaret Conway's name in the entry, the woman who'd been by her side since she was born.
Yeah.
And when referring to the diamonds, Claire apparently wrote, quote, "My diamonds shall go to Dr. Hazard that Claire gave to me. And at my death shall go to Dora if she is alive." So aside from like the terrible syntax of that sentence, you can see she referred to herself in the third person.
Right.
As if maybe Claire wasn't writing the letter at all.
Yeah, she just slipped up. Yeah, these diamonds that Claire already gave to me should go to Dr. Hazard.
Yeah, exactly. A handwriting expert eventually determined the entry to be a blatant forgery. And the second thing they discovered...
It's kind of rough to do like a journal entry in a journal where you can just look at like all the other pages.
Yeah, it's like, very slick.
It's not just like getting a letter out of nowhere.
Yeah, right.
Being like, oh, I guess that kind of looks like Claire's handwriting.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like
totally.
It's a book full of samples.
Yeah, of the way that she speaks and all of those kind of things. Also, the second thing that they discovered was that the page next to this alleged final entry in the diary had been meticulously erased, almost undetectable to the naked eye. So it was likely Claire's authentic final diary entry, and it was completely unrecoverable. And there were more parallels between Dr. Hazard's dead patients. Vice Consul Lucian found more than once that Linda had appointed herself administrator of her parents' estates, or patients' estates, after which she billed the estate exorbitant amounts of money for her fasting cure. So the patient would die, and then Linda would just give them those crazy thousands of dollars big bills, right?
Yeah.
For things like the punch slap massages and canned tomato water dinners, right? Rapidly draining the patient's estates. And they also found wildly overpriced invoices from the Butterworth and Sons funeral parlor, Linda Hazard's funeral parlor of choice, all billed to the deceased patient's estate. And actually, there was a ton of shady things going on connected to the Butterworth and Sons parlor. First, clearly, we have this question of Claire's body. Both Margaret Conway and the sisters' uncle Herbert didn't recognize the body that Linda Hazard had shown them in the basement of the Butterworth Sons family. Sorry, gosh, I'm just like all over the place.
No, you're doing good, girl. You got this. You know, you're a little hungry. It's okay.
Great. So they didn't recognize the body that Linda Hazard had shown them in the basement of the Butterworth and Sons funeral parlor. It had been dressed in Claire's clothes, but it really looked nothing like her. And not only that, it didn't look sickly or emaciated, like it should have been based on what they'd been told. So the persistent suspicion was the body in the coffin was not Claire Williamson. Investigators found that Claire's body had been illegally removed from Olalla. Employees of Butterworth and Sons smuggled it out through a remote boat launch near the sanitarium. So they claimed that there hadn't been enough time to get a permit to remove the body from the health department beforehand, but it all seemed like really suspicious.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like all these little things that kind of came together. Why did they smuggle this body out where no one could see it?
Where is it now? Everything.
Then, late into the investigation, authorities found a key witness, a young worker who'd claimed to have seen Claire Williamson's body after her death and described something that looked nothing like the body shown to Margaret Conway and Uncle John Herbert. Essie Cameron said that she worked as a sort of nurse's aide on Olalla and witnessed the sisters' treatments, the scalding hot baths, the canned food that Linda forced her to claim was fresh, right? The brutal slapping massages that Linda performed while screaming, "Eliminate." She even claimed that she was instructed to give Claire 12-gallon enemas, which is absurd. Now, Essie claimed while Claire was alive, she seemed to be in a lot of pain and discomfort. She had a deep bed sore on her tailbone, and the skin on her face was so tight she couldn't close her lips. She said she could feel Claire's backbone through her stomach. She said after Claire died, she ended up viewing the body. Claire was naked, laid across an ironing board, balanced over a bathtub in a dark room. She said the body looked like a skeleton dipped in paint, covered in purple spots. The eyes were bulging out of the sockets. It was completely nightmarish, almost
so
unreal.
Sad.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
And at the time, Linda Hazard told Essie to keep the condition of the body a secret. But now Essie was telling all. So a lot of that stuff was starting to, I don't think there was a definitive answer for anything, but a lot of things were starting to add up, right? But even with the evidence mounting, the county moaned about the cost of the trial. The sprawling case against Linda expanded and the investigation dragged on. The county felt the case was just too complicated, that it was virtually unwinnable and a waste of money. By November 1911, Claire's supposed murder at the hands of Linda Hazard was international news, but the Kitsap County prosecutor still didn't want to try the case. And he was mad about British Vice Consul Lucian going around banging pots and pans and making all this noise. Lucian had even written the governor of Washington to put pressure on the county to try the case against Linda Hazard. So the county felt Lucian was just being a huge pill about the whole thing, like totally overstepping, like acting like he owned the place, right? British have no power here anymore. Like
it's funny that he's 36. Like, back then, that was just like fully like a force to be reckoned with grown adult man. Now it's like he's 36. It's like, oh, did he get his shit together yet?
He did,
Did he pay off his car note?
Yeah.
Like, good for him.
Good for him.
No roommates? Man, wow, that guy's really getting it together. 36-year-old.
In the end of the whole thing, the British ambassador himself stepped in to help things along, and eventually a trial date was set for January 1912. By now, it was a dark, cold, soggy winter in Olalla. The sanitarium was empty, overgrown with rotting blackberry vines, and Sam Hazard was now a full-blown secret alcoholic buried in his flask. Sam was worried. They were going broke, hemorrhaging money into Linda's defense. And with Linda in prison, if he went to prison, if Linda went to prison, Samuel pretty much had nothing.
Right.
He was helping the business, but that's where his money came from.
Right. That's the whole reason he's with her.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think she freaked him out. She's very hypnotized.
Yeah. Okay. He's in love.
I don't know about, who knows?
Who knows?
But Linda was not depressed or scared or worried. She was on fire. As the trial approached, Linda announced from the steps of the Kitsap County Courthouse in the sleet and wind that she was closing her sanitarium until the trial was concluded. And when she was acquitted, she was going to reopen and go even harder, starving more people than ever before. Well, we get to the trial, right? The trial rehashed everything we talked about pretty much, plus evidence and stuff.
I mean, okay, I'm not trying to make too light of this, I guess, but just you could also just it just seems like anyone could just look at the history of the world and be like, oh, why didn't all those people who starved in that famine and died, in the Bible, come back healthiher? You know what I mean? It's not like there's no one's ever heard of starving before.
No, it's just got real popular for a second.
Right. And I guess beating and screaming eliminate is the key factor.
Yeah. I mean, it's an osteopathic massage. We talked about that, I think, back then. So it's kind of like Rolfing, or I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's around anymore. But
I mean, it just sounds like an excuse to dominate them. I mean, it's obviously not a real thing. So,
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, the massage might be a real thing. In this context, it's not a real thing.
I mean, beating somebody and slapping them and screaming eliminate doesn't feel very...
While they're literally being eliminated.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's just
Nikki,
okay.
I won't tell you again.
I'm just banging the table.
You were just banging that table.
Okay, well, I'm really fired up.
I know. I kind of like that.
And you will tell me again if I do it. So that's okay.
No, I'm not going to. I'm just going to let this be a shaky video. Who watches these things anyway?
Find us on YouTube. Okay. Or Spotify, actually. This whole video is going to be up on Spotify. I'll tell you about that later, Muriel.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Just make sure you take some motion sickness medication.
Shut the fuck up. Shut up.
Just be banging. All right. The trial rehashed everything we talked about pretty much, right? Plus all the evidence. And I'm not going to go into the whole trial. The prosecution's position, I think, is pretty clear. Linda Hazard starved Claire to death intentionally for financial gain. The defense's position was basically that Claire had been critically ill since she was born, which not really backed up by the facts. That nothing could have saved her life, and that Linda Hazard was a healer licensed by the state of Washington who was just trying her best. That the girls were offered all the food they could eat, but they were just too sick to eat it. And that, quote, "We believe the evidence will show that during the time these girls were under Dr. Hazard's treatment, they received care such as the tenderest mother would give her child." The prosecution had some practitioners of traditional Western medicine take the stand to offer their opinions on Linda Hazard's fasting treatment. The doctors basically were like, this starvation thing is stupid. They thought Linda displayed gross ignorance in applying it, and that it appears there are major things about the human body and medicine that Linda simply did not understand. For instance, one doctor testified that Dr. Hazard's autopsy report was ridiculous, listing things like liver cirrhosed, stomach elongated, small intestine of infantile appearance. You know, that no legitimate doctor would ever write something like that on an autopsy report.
Yeah. Heart was gross.
Yeah, gross.
Big ick factor.
Powdered blood in the chamber. They all agreed Claire's death was clearly caused by starvation based on her symptoms. The defense countered that the doctors saying that Linda's methods were malpractice just didn't know anything about homeopathic medicine. So they were just being biased. And that also no one could prove that Claire, didn't die of another disease of the stomach that mimics starvation. So, and they couldn't really argue with that. Reasonable doubt, man.
It's like getting shot and there's a bullet hole in you. It's like, I mean, something, what if it was just something else that made that hole?
Yeah. Or like maybe that happened, but there was a bee in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah. It's really the bee that killed them.
We won't go over the whole trial, but I'll give you some trial highlights.
Good.
Dora Williamson had gained about 40 pounds back. She was a healthy 100 pounds, and she took the stand to testify and just really charmed the pants off of everyone. She's just this classic British lady with this really cute voice.
Yeah.
And like little like antiquated clothes. They just thought she was just the cutest. And also, clearly, she wasn't insane or incompetent, right? And she laid out everything she experienced at the hands of Linda Hazard and her staff, and how Linda had tried to convince her that she was insane. Linda Hazard had a few of her nurses testify on her behalf. One in particular was pretty wild. Nellie Sherman, the strongest little nurse in Linda's corner, she said that everything Dora and the prosecution witnesses said was a total lie, specifically the starvation. Now, she said the sisters were offered cereal, fruit, vegetables, milk and cream, nuts, even like a good, hearty, homemade chicken soup made from the chickens on a lala, right? Claire and Dora, she said, were the problem. The sisters were just super picky about their food and sick and flighty, and they just wouldn't eat anything. This sort of story fell apart pretty quick on cross-examination. Prosecutors were like, so they weren't under a fasting regimen?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The whole point is that they don't eat, right?
Yeah, like they could eat anything they wanted. I thought restricting food was like what the whole thing was about, right?
That's what Linda's just talking about, how she's saving this poor blind kid.
Exactly. At then, Nellie Sherwood got confused and she started talking in circles and not making sense until the defense team noticed Linda Hazard had been making hand signals at her. And actually, that continued throughout the trial. Linda Hazard got in mad trouble over and over again for throwing hand signals at her witnesses, trying to get
third base coach,
trying to get them to influence their testimony. So after closing statements, Linda Hazard told a reporter, "They won't hang me. The muscles in my neck are too strong." The audacity. So February 4th, the jury convicted Linda Hazard, not of first-degree murder, but of manslaughter. Mm-hmm. After the verdict was read, Linda screamed all types of stuff while Sam pulled on her arm and told her to shut her mouth. 3 days later, she was sentenced to 2 to 20 years of hard labor. But Linda Hazard did not go quietly. In fact, she didn't go at all. No one could keep the beast down. She appealed her case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And while she was out on bond, pending the results of the appeal, business was booming. And believe it or not, her supporters rallied around her. One of the grandfathers of fasting medicine, this guy Henry Tanner from California, he went to the press and volunteered to do a 40-day fast directed by Linda Hazard and said if he survived, that his fast should be used as evidence to get Linda a new trial. Linda also went to the press. She also offered to fast herself for the good of science so people could actually learn about fasting. No one took her up on that offer, but she offered it. Linda Hazard's medical license was revoked in July, but she continued to make speeches to the press, write manifestos on fasting, and patients started appearing again.
Yeah, all publicity is good publicity.
Wealthy banker H.C. Anderson had a bad case of food poisoning around 1912 and hired this nurse, June Oakes, to help him recover. You know, clean out the pantry, put the family on a strict diet, try to get, whatever gross stuff in his house out of his house. Nurse June's techniques worked like a charm. H.C. Anderson made a full recovery, and his wife, Ida, became a huge fan of this nurse. So when Ida Anderson got pregnant, she requested the same nurse to come care for her. After the baby was born, Ida and Nurse June decided the baby wasn't healthy enough. So Nurse June put the baby on a fast and gave it mud baths in a creek until the baby died.
Jesus Christ.
And if you were guessing, Nurse June Oakes was a secret disciple of Dr. Linda Hazard, you would be totally correct. H.C. Anderson tried to fire Nurse June after his baby's death, but his wife Ida had a fanatical devotion to her. After Ida had her second baby and was basically starving to death under Nurse June's care, Mr. Anderson fired the nurse and admitted Ida and their newborn to a local hospital. They recovered, but after a few weeks, Ida took the baby and ran away. Ida checked into a hotel and continued the fasting treatment. Nurse June Oakes directed the fast, feeding Ida and the baby only hot water tinted with food coloring and vegetable broth. And while she was out on appeal, Linda Hazard herself came to the hotel every day to give Ida a punishing osteopathic massage. Ida Anderson died in March 1913, but the baby did survive and recover.
Good.
Ida's body was taken to the Butterworth and Sons funeral parlor, where she was embalmed and covered in makeup. And Mr. Anderson, when he saw his wife, just kind of snapped. You know, he claimed the makeup was used to cover up the cause of her death, to make it look less severe. Yeah. So he demanded an investigation into his wife's death, and it was determined her cause of death was clearly starvation. Mary Bailey was a resident of the Home Colony on the Key Peninsula. So I think I told you this, but I guess Home used to be an anarchist settlement.
Which I knew.
I didn't know you, so you knew that.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah. Home Washington is, anyways, we know it. I won't say how we know it, because you guys don't need to know all our business. But yeah, I know Home.
Yeah. A little tough guy. It was at the time, a little radical enclave of about 100 people out there just doing their own thing, right? With
eating huckleberries and gooey ducks and clams and blackberries.
It was like they had a collective land ownership and free love component to whatever they're doing out there.
What were the years that it was founded?
I think like late 1800s through, gosh, I mean, I think it was in its heyday in like the early 1900s.
Yeah.
But it was, totally going strong in 1912.
Yeah.
So Mary Bailey was a middle-aged widow, eccentric, into the occult. She shacked up with one of the leaders of the colony at the time, this guy, Kingsmill Commander. Great name. Commander had done some fasting with Linda Hazard in the past and had lost 113 pounds, dropping down to 112 pounds. He said...
Cut himself in half.
Yeah. And, 112 is... if he was a normal sort of average height man.
I'm less than what his starting weight by like 10 pounds or something. But could you imagine me in half? If I went from 200 to 100?
He said it was the best he had ever felt in his life. Like, he was still talking about this fast he had done with Linda Hazard.
I don't understand. He's an anarchist who wants to name himself Commander Kingswell.
Kingsmill Commander.
Kingsmill Commander. Still, he's got King in his name and Commander. It's like, that's when you know your anarchist shit goes sideways. As soon as someone's like, well, actually, I'm the leader and I'm the commander and I'm the king, it's like, oh, actually, this whole thing is no longer... This thing lost the plot. You know what I mean?
I would just counter that.
Yeah.
What's cool is he can do whatever he wants. You know what I mean? That's part of it. Just do whatever you want, man. Okay. I think I tried to read about anarchy. I was like, this is taking too long. I don't know. I don't really even know.
Okay.
So she's shacking up with this guy commander in this kind of like fun, freaky anarchist community.
Great.
And he tells her this is the best thing that ever happened to me is losing this weight with this, wild lady up in the hills. And when Linda Hazard started making headlines before her murder trial, Mary Bailey was convinced that this was all a sign that she needed to go work with Linda Hazard. So she traveled to the Hazard Sanitarium in Olalla for the first time in November 1911, just a couple months before the start of Linda's murder trial. Just like a week after Ida Anderson died of starvation, Kitsap County authorities found Mary Bailey's emaciated remains in a shack in the Olalla Sanitarium. That was about March of 1913. A tip had led them to the cabin where Mary Bailey had been living on the property. She was wrapped in filthy, unwashed blankets, and the hot bricks the staff had used to keep her warm had burned through their wrappings and into Mary Bailey's body while she was still alive.
Jesus. Dr.
Hazard claimed she didn't really know what was going on in the cabin, right? She said, me and Mary Bailey were just friends. I don't really know anything about her. But folks from the home colony said Mary Bailey had been telling everyone, I'm fasting under the direction of both Nurse June Oakes and Linda Hazard. And they found Mary's diary in which she wrote she was taking a fast cure from Dr. H. Linda Hazard said that was just the ramblings of a senile old woman and dismissed the whole thing. Now, because authorities were convinced Linda would lose her appeal and was headed to prison anyway, they declined to charge her with anything related to the deaths of Ida Anderson and Mary Bailey. And, they were right. Linda's final appeal was rejected, so she showed up with her suitcase unescorted, ready to serve her sentence in the fall of 1913. And this is actually kind of crazy. She showed up to the prison without getting arrested. So she showed up with no paperwork. It was the first time in history that's ever happened. She just said, well, I'm here. I lost my appeal. Put me in jail. And they were just like, what? They took them a bunch of days to figure out
what her sentence
was. How to process her.
Yeah.
Kitsap County.
What's up with the husband at this point?
You know what? He's really not having the greatest time.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in just a second. But he did at one point write a letter to the jailers, to the people in the prison who were running the prison, to just be like, listen.
Can I borrow $100?
No, it was about how he was just trying to explain, my wife is really difficult. So this is how you handle her. He was trying to help her out a little bit. She's really, really hard to handle.
He was doing her a favor.
Yeah, trying to mitigate how crazy she was going to be in prison.
I would do that for you.
Well, I appreciate that. I would definitely do that for you. You're hella hard to handle.
No.
All right, Linda, she did fairly easy time. And she was released after just 2 years. They released her before Christmas so she could spend time with her family over the holidays. The only problem was they didn't have a house anymore.
Or family. Who's her family?
Her husband. And then she had a son from a first marriage that I just didn't incorporate in because he's lurking around. He's an oddball.
Okay.
He was 5'2". Actually, this is kind of funny. When they lived in Seattle, he's a smaller dude, and I believe he wanted to be an actor. So he was a child. He was able to play a child in local theater in Seattle for a really long time because he was small enough. And then he got bigger and was like, I want to play a leading man role. And they were just like, no. And then his acting career died up. And then he just stopped working and just hung out at his mom's house.
So he's like us and all of our friends.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think he was a little more evil. And then there's other stuff.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks for that. That was a good little
tangent.
Yeah.
They didn't have a house anymore because left alone in rainy Olalla with no followers or patients, Samuel Hazard just kind of got drunk and flailed around. He couldn't get a job. He couldn't make any money. He ended up renting the property in order to pay the mortgage. So Linda was down and out, flat broke, nowhere to live, and bound by the parole board to stay in Washington, where she had no hope of regaining her medical license. But the universe wasn't done yet.
Oh, she's manifesting, huh?
For some reason, I don't really know why. Maybe I missed it, but I couldn't figure it out. The governor of Washington pardoned Linda on the condition that she leave the U.S. So she and Samuel then sailed to New Zealand, where she had fans, and Linda was able to practice starving people from a plush office in Auckland. It's just like she slid right back into it. Linda wrote another book on fasting while she was out there, and she made money hand over fist.
Just killing people and stealing their jewels.
Something. And that brings us to Olala 2.0. In 1920, the bitch came straight back to Olala. She had made so much money starving people in New Zealand. She was coming back to rebuild her dream sanitarium on the hill in the Pacific Northwestern wilderness. She was still barred from having a medical license, but called herself Dr. Hazard anyway. And Dr. Hazard blew into Olala, ready to build it up. She was a booster in the community. She gave out academic scholarships. She helped bring electricity to Olala. So she was actually really popular. And she built her extravagant, elegant, state-of-the-art sanitarium. It was the jewel of the community. Beautiful architecture, huge, 3 stories. The floors were like polished until they were gleaming. They were made of oak. She had a grand staircase. Linda called it a school of health to skirt any legalities, although she was regularly arrested for practicing medicine without a license. She starved another man to death in 1925, a farmer who had sold everything to land a spot at the School of Health, and died 84 days later, weighing just 100 pounds.
Sad.
For that death, Linda was fined $100. And then, in May 1935, the sanitarium burned to the ground. The fire started in an attic bedroom and spread so fast, there was nothing anyone could do. It was gone in about 30 minutes.
Jeez.
They managed to pull all the patients out in time. So in the wreckage, there was this small herd of skinny folks in baggy clothes. Samuel Hazard just staring blankly into space, shell-shocked. And Linda herself pacing around, screaming and crying and ranting that it was all gone. The sanitarium was never rebuilt to its former glory. Linda and Samuel moved back into the original little house where Claire Williamson had died. And for 3 years, Samuel and Linda eked by with their few remaining patients. By then, all of Olala seemed past its prime. Most of the businesses in town had burned down or rotted, and people moved away. In late spring 1938, Linda Hazard gathered all of her disciples together. Linda by then was pushing 70 and in bad health, and she wanted to rally. She wanted to take life by the balls again, and she knew there was only one way: fasting. She spent her last days mostly bedridden, surrounded and cared for by her dwindling followers. She used the last of her energy to endure her daily enemas and yell at Samuel, who was drunk on the couch. And in June 1938, Linda Hazard starved herself to death. The end.
A Washington State story.
Legacy.
Good job, Muriel. That was a trilogy. We did it.
Yeah. Pretty crazy story, huh?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they just really did not think it was a problem to sit around and watch people starve to death. They loved it.
Who?
The Hazards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around. I mean, she did it to herself, so she must have thought maybe she was doing something right.
She's like, it's finally time I walk the walk,
And she did. Well, not really.
She starved the
pretty much
starve.
just sat in a bed.
Yeah.
People brought her broth.
Someone slapped her, screamed eliminate, and she just went into the peaceful hereafter.
I guess.
The end. Thank you so much for listening to Muriel's Murders. Muriel did all the writing, the research, the hosting. I did all the other things. You guys did the listening, the watching.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here.
You guys are the ones. Oh, please share this podcast. We would like to see those numbers go up. We want some new people that we can bring into our inner circle. You know what I mean? So it's amazing when you guys tell other people about us and post about us and all that kind of fun stuff. And we think you're amazing. Find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all
Los
the
Angeles, streets of Los Angeles.
Yeah, just start screaming at people. Nick, Muriel, no.
Is that you?
No, not you. All right, well, I'll try again later. We love you guys. Muriel, good job. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. Good job.
Okay, take care of yourself and each other. R.I.P. Jerry Springer.
Bye.
Goodbye.